Welcome everyone to this first prep session for graded assignment 2. Today we are going to talk about how to create a program with multiple functions, as you can see. And normally I just have, a single program and and I do have that here, and I've got instructions. And the first thing it says here is the goal of this exercise is to learn how to break down a program into small achievable parts and think through what orders things should be in and how it should all fit together. So I've got some instructions that I refer to over here, instructions.txt. And then I also have, a quick link to that document we were just looking at over here. This is a Google Doc. And I did that because I really wanted to be able to lay it out, especially for people who are coming, behind and reading this, later on. So it's got examples from this problem specifically, and everything kind of, together. So we'll kind of go back and forth and talk through all of this. And I do have a demo. I am intentionally not going to show it to you yet because most of the time you're not going to have a demo to look at. This program you're going to be writing is going to be a little bit of a mystery, and you're not quite sure what it's supposed to look like yet. You have to figure that out. And that's kind of the point of what we're talking about today. And I've got this other thing over here about when we talk about planning notes, there's another file over here we can look at. So let's start with what we're talking about here. Okay, so for graded assignment 2, you're going to be writing a program called Scrabble Score. It will run in the console just like your graded assignment 1 did. It has a lot of moving parts. Okay, so we're going to have to be really organized about how you structure your code and how you approach writing all of it and putting it all together. So this exercise called Physician Directory is a good example. And I have a link here too. I just want to mention it now while I think about it. That goes back to my document that has like all these practice exercises. And some of you are already aware of this. And down here, starting I think currently on page 5, is the graded assignment prep exercises. So we are here. This is what we're working on right now. And once we're done, I'll have the video up here and the links to the REPLs. So you can always go back and refer to that. Okay. So the first thing you want to think about when you've got a program that is going to have a lot of different parts is the general structure. And this is not always perfectly the case, but this is generally a really, really good approach to go through. And your Scrabble Score instructions from Launch Code for that graded assignment 2 may not follow this strictly. And you definitely want to follow, kind of what parts they have you do in order. But as a general rule, we can go over this and it will still help you, even if it differs a little bit from the order they put things in. But in terms of the way that the code all fits together, generally you always want your imports at the top. You always want your variables and data to come next. And then after that is when you start writing all your functions. So you'll have a bunch of smaller functions, things that you're going to use from down here, this main function that runs the whole program. So this is a good pattern to think about when you are trying to figure out how to put all of your code together in your file. So let's look at the requirements. You always obviously want to start with the instructions. So we can take a look at this. This is actually a screenshot of, this file right here. So I can zoom in a little bit more, I think, maybe not. There we go. So the instructions say you're going to create a small program that allows the user to find the names and numbers of local doctors. They should be able to search by name, by first letter of last name, or by area code. And you should also give them the option to view all of the records. If searching by name, they should give only a partial I think I miswrote that. Okay, so I'm going to fix this, but it should say they should give only like a partial first or last name, not both names. If searching by area code, we have 3 choices: St. Louis metropolitan area, right? 314, 636, and 618. So the data for each doctor has been given to you. You'll see that in a second. but you need to transform it so that it actually is easier to use in your functions. And so instead of having 3 separate strings, instead of having a single string that's comma separated, you're going to have 3 separate strings. The search results for the user should be sorted by last name and formatted with each doctor's name and number on separate lines with a space in between each listing, just like this. So you got a doctor, a phone number, a space, a doctor, a phone number, a space. Now, other than that, you can customize your results however you would like. And you can see, later kind of how I decide to do it. After the results are displayed for the user, they should be asked if they wish to perform another search. And if they don't want to continue, the program should end with some kind of closing message to the user. And then the last thing it says here is make sure to implement case insensitivity where needed, because you can't control what the user puts in, and you don't want your program to not work for them just because of, a difference in, case sensitivity. So let's see, we've got to plan things out. First thing is read the requirements carefully, which we just did. And you want to ask yourself some questions. What's the purpose of the app? Well, we established that the point is for the user to be able to find doctors' names and numbers. That's the end goal, is to produce that for them. What should it look like? Do you need to format it in a certain way? Well, yeah, we just talked about that, right? The instructions tell you specifically to kind of make it look like this when the results are being spit out. And then what are the technical requirements? So it talks about that up here, about the data, that you need to transform it so that it's in an array of 3 strings instead of a single string. And then it also tells you down here about the case and sensitivity. And so there's, things like that, you just kind of want to know about them ahead of time so you can be thinking it through as you code. Is there a specific order in which you're being asked to code things? And I talked about that a second ago. Your instructions for graded assignment 2 may not follow the order we're going to do things today, but do them in the order they tell you to, definitely. Okay, so once we've kind of read through those instructions, gotten a sense of where it is we're going, we're going to start asking ourselves some questions so we can plan. And this is where I have, this planning notes thing where I started writing up some notes. And anywhere that I have these ellipses, those are places where I left it up to you to be able to write your own notes, kind of the same way that I've started to. And then, down here with some of the functions I'm thinking about. So let's break that down. What imports do you need? We can talk about that first, right? The only import we need for this is readline sync library so that we can get user input. And then what data do you already have? Well, if we go over here and look, they've given us this whole array of doctors, right? All these different doctors, which you may notice are all from television shows, because I thought that would be funny. Okay. Then what data are you going to need? Well, we already know we're going to have to get some input from the user, right? So, I made a little list about that. Let's go back to the planning notes. Yeah. Oh, and when I made my note here about the data I already had, I also made a note about, okay, I know it comes like this, but I want it to look like this, an array with 3 strings. And then, data we need to ask user for which type of search they want. And the idea here is to use numbers for their input that's going to correspond to the index of the functions that we're going to put in a single array so that we can refer to them and select which one they want. And then we're going to need to create an array to hold those functions. And we need basically, these three different functions we're doing, whether it's by name, by first letter of last name, or by area code. We're going to need, certain input from the user on that as well in order to, narrow things down, to filter the results. And when we're pulling the matching records for the user, we're going to need some things. When we print the results, we'll need some things. And, you can kind of think that through later. And then, at the very end, we're going to need to get user input when we ask them if they need to do another search. So, multiple ways. Sometimes we are asking the user for input, And sometimes it's a matter of data manipulation, like I talk about here, things that you have to produce yourself. You build a string, you're calculating numbers, you're collecting things into arrays or objects. And by the way, we are not covering objects today because that class is this coming Wednesday. And so I didn't want to make this too complicated for people who haven't had a chance to learn about objects just yet, because I know some of you are still working on your prep work for that. Next Saturday, we will have a different problem altogether, and it will definitely include objects so that it is, comprehensively covering everything you need to know for graded assignment 2. Okay, so we've gotten all this information. We've kind of made our notes about the data we're going to need. So what smaller functions do we need? What are the little broken down things that we know we need to accomplish? Okay, let's look at that first. So we need, if we just start at kind of the headers, the main points here, we know we need to transform the original data, right? So we'll need a function for that. We are going to want a function to ask the user which search type they want and also validate it. And because there's enough code there, it's worth it to do it in a separate function that you can then call from the main program. Then we have our 3 functions that represent the different types of searches: searching by name, searching by the first letter of the last name, searching by area code. And then we'll want a function to handle printing the formatted results so that we don't have, because that could get kind of long, and we don't want to kind of make this unnecessarily complicated if we can just put that over into a single smaller function. And then last, we have our main function, where we know that there are a number of things that we need to do. I'm going to get back to that in just a second. So in each of these smaller functions, you got to ask yourself some questions. What global variables will be referenced? We already know we have that array of doctors, right? And so we're going to, be referencing that when we, for example, up here in this first function to transform the original data, we're going to pull that in globally. What data needs to be passed in as one or more parameters? Well, when we are doing our searches by name or first letter of last name or by area code, we're going to need to pass in the altered array of the doctor's information in the new format. And then, you're going to need to establish some local variables inside some of your functions just to, accomplish it, right? To get to the point where you can return the expected result. What kind of mechanisms does a function need? Do you need conditionals or for loops or while loops? You want to kind of make some notes on that. And then where in the overall program is this function going to be needed? So let's look at the, get the search type from user. Okay, that's the first thing we get from the user. I know that I'm going to need to use input.question. And I know I'm going to need to list the options for them so they can read, okay, choose, 0 if you want to search by name, choose 1 if you want to search by the first letter of last name, etc. We're going to add on a 4th option that's just to return all results. And then we're going to validate to make sure that they only put in a number from 0 to 3. Because those are the 4 indexes that will correspond to the 4 things that we can provide for them. And then we also know we need to return the number. That's what the function is going to return as the value, that is whichever number they chose. And we're going to eventually call this from the main function as one of the first things that happens, right? So I'm making these notes to kind of think through each one very carefully and ask these questions for each one of the functions. And you can go through and you can continue to do that, function by function, think it through. What are you going to need? How do you need to do it? Excuse me, let me get some water. Okay, yeah, a couple more questions. Does the function need to return a value, or is it just accomplishing something, like printing something to the console? Well, some of our functions will return values and some of them won't. So it's good to kind of think about that. If it does need to return a value, is that going to be a string, a number, a Boolean, an array, an object? You have to think about what's coming out in order to know how to make use of it once you've gotten that value back in your main function. So you ask that question, what makes the most sense for how it needs to be used for the next part of your code? And it's okay if the list of functions you make at the beginning when you're planning doesn't end up being what you do, because this is a process, right? You're going to think it through. You're going to do the best you can at the very beginning, but there's going to be things that didn't occur to you the first time around. So as you go, you're going to have to be flexible and say, oh man, I think I've just thought of a better way to do this. And so then you can kind of change your notes, plan it out. The last part is, how will you order things in your main function? And this is really important because the whole program has to run smoothly, and you want to figure out how all of your smaller functions are going to fit together. So you want to ask these questions. What does the user need to see only once at the beginning? Is there any input that the user needs to give you only once at the beginning? What parts of your program need to be able to run again and again as long as the user wants? And then what should the user see once they've decided they're done? So I, started making those notes over here for my main function. The first thing I need to do is to transform that doctor's array to where the data is in a different format. And then I can use it. I'm going to print some sort of introduction message for them that only needs to be done once. And then I'm going to do a whole bunch of things in a loop, right? And we can think that through. We're going to ask them what type of search method they want. And then depending on which search method they chose, we're going to ask them for some further information so that we can go and bring those results back that match what they want. And then we're going to print those results for them. And then we're going to ask them, do you want to do this again? And if they do, then we just loop back around. If they don't, then the final thing that this main function will do is to print some sort of exit message to them, which was in our instructions. You don't have to do that, but we're going to do it. It was in the instructions. Okay. So I've kind of, got a bigger picture here about how it all needs to fit together. And then I've got all of the smaller functions that I'm going to use in order to accomplish that, right? Let's see. So now that we have planned, we can start being methodical about our coding. The first thing that I tend to do is to plan it all out and to structure my code with comments. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, at the very top, I've got the imports, right? We talked about that. Imports are the first thing. So I've got a little to do here, import readline sync library. Then we've got our data section. We already have this given information in a specific format where they're all strings of information. And we're going to put all of the functions, the search functions that we create down here into an array. So we can put that here. And then our functions, we have a whole bunch of small ones, right? So I went ahead and put to-dos to kind of mark the places where I'm going to put each of those so that I can remember what I need to do. And I tend to put it in the order that I'm probably going to call them from down here in the main function. That kind of helps me keep track of things as this code gets longer and longer. Then the main function, I've just got a couple of to-dos, put everything together into a single function. And then the last one, of course, you have to call that main function so that the program will run. And this is the only thing that we will actually call out here. Everything else will be where we're calling a function from inside a function. And that's kind of the goal, is just to have a single thing, run program. And we can look at, let's see. We go down here. Yeah. Once you're ready, you can start that coding and start putting your things in place. Let me make sure that oh yeah. Okay, so here's something worth mentioning. You can call functions in the third section from variables in the second section. Now, you've been taught that JavaScript runs from top to bottom. That's absolutely true. But functions are special. JavaScript looks for the function when it's compiling, and it can be anywhere in your program. So you can reference it from data above, and you can also call it from inside other functions, whether that function is above or below the other function. Does that make sense? So that's something to keep in mind. And you're actually going to definitely find that out with Scrabble Score, because the way that they're going to have you move through it, you're actually going to have some things out of this type of order, and it won't matter, because as long as you have your functions contained and then referenced properly, the whole program will be able to compile, and it'll know where to look for each thing. Okay, so once you are ready to code, I recommend declaring this main function first. And so guess what? We get to code. All right, I'm going to call this function run program, which is exactly what it does. It doesn't need to take, parameters? It doesn't take parameters, because we are going to go get all the values that we need. So I kind of, I can start there. I can also say that I just want to run the program so that it'll always run. And the reason I want to do this first is because I can build this function, the program piece by piece, and then just run it and say, okay, up until this point, my program is running. And then you can add the next part and say, oh, up until this point, I know my program is running. And each part you can kind of, keep track of what part for sure already works, and what part might have some issues in it that you need to fix. But just do it a little bit of time and test it by just running this, which is what you're going to do in the very end. But so we'll only add things as we're ready to. So let's take a look. We know that we kind of talked about this from our planning, right? So I'm going to start putting some comments in here that match my planning a little bit. Yeah, so first we're going to transform that data. So transform, and you can use to-dos too if you want to. Transform doctor data, and then we're going to print intro message, if I can type it correctly. Then we are going to loop through, you know what, I'm not going to say that. Yeah, I will say that. Loop through main program. And then we're going to, I'm going to call that the main functions of the program. That probably is still not a good terminology to use. Okay, let me think about this. I refer to this as the main function, so I don't want to confuse you guys. All right, loop through everything that should repeat. That works, right? Okay. And then once the user is done, we will print a outro message, outgoing message, and that's it, right? So we kind of have a format here, and then under here, we can go a step further and say, okay, the first thing that we need to do is ask user for search type, and then once they've told us the search type, we can go get results using correct search function. And then once we have those results, we can print the results for user. And then that's when we ask them if user wants to search again. Okay. Is everybody tracking with me? I'm going fast because there's a lot to do and I don't want this to take absolutely forever. But yeah, when you kind of get to the point that you have thought through this enough to where you have an order, it really helps to kind of have that up front So then all you have to do is kind of come in and fill in the blanks, right? Because excuse me, a project or a problem like this, to be able to write up a program that has, this many different functions, it can get really overwhelming if you're not organized and you're trying to think, man, how was I going to handle that? Or what's the best way to do that? So, already I may not have coded very much, but this planning is going to save me so much time in thinking everything through, because I've kind of got an idea of everything I need and what order it needs to be in and how that's going to run when I run my whole program. And like I said before, you don't have to have it right before you start. I have the benefit of having already written this program, so I know exactly what I need. But it's okay for you to change things, but having this structure will make it easier for you to do that, to start making changes and saying, okay, I think I want to handle this differently. So let's, plan a little differently. Maybe I want to, do this part differently. But yeah, have that structure. So let's just do this one at a time. Transform the doctor data. So this is where we go up to our very first one, although hang on, we didn't import, right? Imports first. Let's do that. All right, somebody remind me, how do we import the readline sync library?
Const input equals require parents readline sync. Readline sync is in quotes.
Good. Oops. Perfect. Yeah.
So many times writing that.
Yep. That's good, because that's how you finally remember it. I remember when it was new to me and I was like, man, I got to go look that up again. But then eventually you remember it. So yes. And now we have that variable input that we can use to ask the user questions and allow them to give us something back. And then we'll be able to do something with that value. Okay. We also had this to do here. Let's go ahead and well, you know what? We can't do this yet because we don't even know the names of those functions yet, do we? Okay, so let's actually go back to the next thing, which is to start with these functions. So we said the first thing is to transform that data, right? Sorry, my mouse is or trackpad's giving me trouble. There we go. Okay, so here we need a function, and we'll call this transform data. Pretty simple. And because this doctors array is a global variable, I don't need to pass it in. So I'm just going to leave that blank. And then we are going to write this thing. And I'm going to go reference what I've already written to save us time in another window here. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do, we know that we're going to still have it in an array, right? Like one big array. So let's establish that. We're going to have new array be an empty array, because we're going to add things to it as we go. And then the next part will be to have a loop, because we need to go through each of these doctors' records one at a time, right? So let I equals 0, that's our starting point. We want it to loop as many times as we have doctors. So we're going to take the length of doctors. That's the name of this array up here, right? This is what we're working through. Okay, so this is the one we want to loop through. We'll take its length. Then the loop knows how many times to loop. And then we know we're going to increment by 1. So we use the shorthand for that. Now, we are going to want to create the new data for each one as we go. So we know that we've got a string with 3 comma separated values. You guys ever heard of a CSV file? That's what that stands for, comma separated values. It's a very old but tried and true way to put data that, like for an Excel spreadsheet, you can actually store it as text by putting commas between everything. Okay, and then we basically are just going to, the easiest way to make an array out of this, can anybody tell me what that would be?
You want to split at the comma?
Yeah, that is the easiest way. It does not have to be complicated. So let's have this variable called subarray, and I'm calling it that because we're putting an array inside an array now, instead of a single string inside of an array. So we're going to just take that and we're going to go to doctors. We're going to find the element at I, so that every time we loop around, we're looking at a different one. And then we're going to split it. Because it's a string, we can use this split, and we know we want to split it at the comma. And actually, we want to split it with the comma and the space, right? Because that's what's in between each one. So I've got a comma and a space inside here. Okay. And then we want to collect it, right? We need to make sure that we're putting it in our new array. So how do I do that? Somebody tell me.
Push. Do we need to push?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to take that new array and we're going to push the smaller array we just created, subarray, into it. Okay, so we've got this looping around to every single element up here. That's these strings. And each one, we're splitting it and then we're putting it into our new array. So at the end, we would expect that we would have, we're going to return that new array. And we would expect that we would be able to see it. And here's what I'm going to do. Every once in a while, you're going to want to do, well, I'll put the comment after, just console log to make sure things are what you think they are, right? So once we've created the whole array, I'm just going to log it so we can kind of see what it looks like. Because once you start running your program, you're not ever going to see this. It's just going to be behind the scenes. But we can do this. I'll just, call it, temp, because we know it's not actually part of the program. And oh, I haven't called transform data, have I? Okay, so this is the pattern we want to get into. We want to add these things one at a time. All right, so all I need to do is call transform data, except we actually do want to actually store that, right? Because now we need to be able to reference it. We want to be able to use it. So let's call that new, let's call it doctor data, because the other one was called doctors, right? We just want to make sure it's not the same name since the other one's global. Okay, so let's run this and see what happens. There we go. Okay, so we can see we've got an array here, a bigger array, and each one is now an array of 3 different strings. And that is distinctly different from having a single string of 3 different things, right? And this is going to make things much easier for us to be able to reference just part of this anytime we want to. And it would have been a lot harder to do that every single time we want to go in here and look for something when it's all just part of one single string. So this was worth doing. It's going to make things a lot easier. All right. So now that I have tested that, I can go ahead and take this. Oops. What did I just do? All right. Yeah. Command / on a Mac, Control / on a PC. Let's see, comment things out really quickly. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to say we have that, and now we know because we just printed it out that we have this. And I could, if you feel like you need to test it again to make sure that it's actually come into your main program the way you want it to, now you can console log doctor data, right? And you would expect to get the same thing. Yep, there you go. So you got it. You went to the called this function, it returned the new array, and now we can see it. Okay. All right, so we've got the first one done. Now we want some sort of intro message. And this is not something that we need a function for, right? This is just something we want to print at the very beginning. And it's not part of our loop. We only want to do it once. So I'm going to go ahead and I I think, copy this over to save us a little bit of time. All right. Real simple. Welcome to the directory of physicians for the St. Louis metropolitan area. That's all it says. But it's just a nice, friendly way to open your program. Okay. Now we have our different things that we want to do. I am not going to implement the loop right away because I want to make sure that it works once before I worry about getting that loop right so that, I can actually let the user use it over and over again. Let's just make sure it works once. So I'm actually going to start here. So ask user for search type. Let's say we want search type, and we're going to create a function called get search type. Naming functions is important, and you want to just be as straightforward as possible, and you want to be specific, and it doesn't have to be terribly long. But search type actually represents, and you know what? I'm going to be even more specific about this, because when I go to get this, remember we said we were going to kind of like do it by numbers. Like if you want it by name, give us a 0. If you want it by first letter of last name, give us a 1. So this actually represents an index because they're numbers. So let's go ahead and call that search type index. And then we're going to call the get search type function. And that should bring back that number. Okay, so let's go write this thing. All right. New function. And we said we were going to call it get search type. It does not need to take a parameter because all we're doing is getting some, about to screw up my syntax there. Okay, because we're just going to go get some information and return it. All right, so probably, I'm going to double check things here. I would like to write this for you, but I don't want to take too long. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to ask them to pick a search type. We're going to display it for them. And then we're going to validate their response. We want to do both of those things in this function. And that's really the reason to actually pull it out, is because of that validation piece. That way you only run this once, but you have that validation going and it doesn't take up a bunch of space in your main function. So let's ask them for the search type that they want. And we'll remember that when you ask for something and you need to use that information, you have to store it in a variable. So and we can just call this search type index. The reason I can get away with using this same name here as I'm using down here is, well, can anybody tell me before I tell you?
Scope.
Scope, exactly. Because this is limited to this function. It's inside this function. It's not global. And then same thing here. This is limited to this function. So I can use the same name inside each of them and the program will not get confused by that. Okay. And so now we're going to do our input.question and ask our question. What type of search would you like to do? Straightforward, right? And then we need to give them their options. So I could say, and I'm going to put it on the next line. So I'm going to use that \n escape character. And we'll say that 0 is going to be search by name. And then we'll do another one with choice 1, search by first letter of last name. Then we'll do the next one. Oops. If you don't want a space at the beginning in the console, you have to not put a space between here and here. Okay. 2 is going to be search by area code. And then the last one we said is going to be return display all doctors. Let's just do that, right? Okay. And
Curious, why are you doing 0? Just for index purposes? Or?
Yeah,
Okay.
because we want this to correspond to the index.
Okay.
Remember, when we get up here, we're going to have this array that has
Right.
all three of these search functions in it,
Right.
and it'll correspond perfectly.
Okay. I thought you were just going to add one to it so it didn't throw people off, but that's cool.
Yeah. You can do that if you want. I'm going to keep
Yep.
it straightforward.
Yep.
For now, just to visually, it's easier to tell. Okay.
Sounds good.
Because you really can do this however you want to, but this is the most straightforward way. Okay, so we're going to have that little question that we ask. We're going to store the response, and then we want to validate it because we can't control what the user does, and they might throw a 4 in there or a 7, or they might put in like a non-number. They might actually put in name instead of choosing 0. So we need to validate, because we need to make sure that this value is what we need for the program to run properly. Okay. So what kind of mechanism do we use for validation? Somebody tell me.
If condition. The if condition we need to use.
It's going to have a condition, but we need to be able to do it over and over again if they keep getting it wrong.
A while.
While.
Yeah, a while loop. Exactly. We don't know how many times it's going to take for them to get it right. They may just have really bad typing skills and they just keep putting it in wrong or something, right? So we got to account for that. So we're going to say while, and we'll have a condition there. And then the part that we need to repeat is going to go inside. So let's think about this. We know that search type index has to be between 0 and 3, right? Oh, I forgot to put the 3 here, y'all. Let's fix that. There we go. Choice 3. Okay. Search type index. It needs to be, so if they were to actually put something that was less than 0, we'd want to catch it, right? Or if they put something that was greater than 3, we'd want to catch it. Or if, now this little thing right here is not a number. That allows us to check and see if something is a number or not. So if they, and if it were a number, even though initially it comes in as a string, this automatically would convert it, and because it'll know whether it's able to be converted to a number or not. So if it tests this with is not a number and it says, nope, this cannot be converted to a number, this is going to come back true. So any of these things, if they are true, we want this loop to run. And then we need to ask them again, right? And we don't need to declare it again. So we can just take that and do this. Well, that's a lot of repeated code. So
Change it to a method or function.
I think that probably in this case, it doesn't need to be a whole function, just because all we're really looking for is to simplify a string.
Oh,
So
a constant.
Yeah, let's just set a string and let's call it options. We'll just move our options out. That's probably a pretty good compromise, right? So let's take this part right here. Yeah, okay. Let's take this part and let's save it in this string right here. And now we can change this to a template literal. See that with the backticks? And then instead, we're just going to put options. And now we've got something that's a lot more workable and less complicated. But the other thing you want to think about here is, for your user experience, if they keep putting something in and it's just not working and they don't know why, that's very frustrating for them, right? So if you want to kind of think about telling them what it is that they did wrong. So I might just add here, please enter a number from 0 to 3. And then they know exactly what it is that we're looking for and they can try to answer again. Does that make sense? because I mean, you can repeat the same question, but I think it's nice to tell them what it is that they did wrong. Okay, and then once they get past that, once this, they satisfy the conditions that, none of these come back true, then it'll move on and you can return search type index. And now down in our main program, we're going to have an index that actually corresponds to what we want. So let's just test and make sure that this is coming back the way we want. Let's run the program. Okay, so which search would I like? Let's just choose one. And it's printing one because it came back. Good. So we stored it properly. We called the function properly. And now that value is ready for us. It's stored here so that we can use it in the rest of this program. Or I'm sorry, the rest of this function, the run program function. Now, the only thing I've noticed here is that things are a little wonky in the console. So let's think about how we can clean that up a little bit. I think for one thing, we want to put another space here so that the user's response is further down. And then we also want probably to have a break right before each of these so that it's spread out a little bit. These are the kind of things you can kind of, change as you go. And then I could go even further than that. And I could say, you know what, these kind of being rammed up against here, it's harder to read. What if we were to put tabs in? So after we go to the next line, but before each option, we can put \T and it'll put tabs. So let's try it again. Yeah, see, that looks a little better. It's a little easier to read. So these are the kinds of things that you can, experiment with and kind of make it come out the way you want. So we've got a successful user input function. And we also need to test it to make sure that the while loop works, right? So what if I were to put in, a word? It's going to ask us again, and this time it's going to tell us you need a number from 0 to 3. Well, my finger slipped and I hit a 7. Well, it's going to keep asking until I put something in that's actually correct. And this is because I still have that console log. So now that we know that it works, I'm going to comment that out. And then we have our next one. We're going to get the results using the correct search function. So this is where having that array of 3 different functions is going to be useful, because all we have to do is go get the right one using that index. But we need to create those functions first. So let's go up and do that. We're going to need 3 functions: name, first letter of last name, area code, right? All right. To save us a little bit of time, I'm going to copy this over, and then we're just going to talk through it. All right. So this function, as it turns out, does need to have a parameter, because we can't use the global doctors anymore, because that's not the one we want to work with. We want to work with this doctor data right here. So we're going to feed that into it when we're ready to call it. So it's taking in the array of multiple doctor arrays, and then we have to start out with results, because we're going to filter it. We're going to go look and see which ones match the name, and then we'll only put it in this array if it actually matches, right? So the first thing we do is another user input, and we start with search term and say, please enter all or part of a first or a last name. And so then they can, try that out. And if they do it correctly, it will move past this while loop. And then we can start, doing our little for loop to go get the results. If they don't do it right, we got to think through what are the conditions in which we need to ask them again. And for one thing, if they put a space in there, it's going to trip up our function. And also, if it's not a number, and I know that might sound confusing at first, let me take that space out of there. Okay, so I used the bang operator here to say the opposite of this. So it's going to go look and see if something is a number. And we want to make sure that it is in fact not a number. So we only want it to catch this in the while loop if it is a number. Does that make sense? I know that's probably a little bit confusing. This is the fastest way to do it though. You just check to see if it's a number, and if it is in fact a number, then we have a problem because our doctor's names don't have numbers. So that's the other condition we're checking for. And then same thing, no numbers or spaces. Please enter all or part of a first or last name. So I just took that simple string and just altered it a little bit, and it didn't take up a lot of space. So we're just going to leave it like that. Now that we know we've gotten past the validation, we have a string that has no spaces and it's just made up of letters. Then we are going to go find it. So we're going to loop through, again, not doctors, but the new doctor array, the new data structure we created. We're going to loop through that. And then we're going to go check each one. So let's break down this syntax just a little bit, because I know that you guys are pretty new at putting a lot of this together. So let's just talk it through. The first thing that might match would be the first name, right? So we're going to go check the first name, and then this or operator, and the second part, this is the last name, because we want to check. You remember in our data, we have 3 strings now in those arrays. We've got last name and then first name and then the phone number. So this one's actually, if it's at index 0, it's actually going to be last name, right? And if it's index 1, it's going to be the first name. So we are going, and the first bracket notation here goes to this array and looks for the doctor, looks for that whole array of all 3 pieces of information for them. And then we want to look inside that array. So we have a 2-dimensional array here. And that says go look specifically at index 0, and we know that's where the last name is. We're going to convert it to lowercase so that it doesn't matter whether they put it in lower or uppercase. And then we're going to search and see if the string that they gave us, again, lowercase, we want to make sure their user input is also lowercase, if it includes that, right? And if it does, then we'll have something to push. Same thing, we're going to check the first name that's at index 1 of that doctor's array, and then make sure that it's included somewhere in there before we push it. And if it's not, it just skips it. We don't need an else here, right? Because we only want to do something if something is true, and otherwise we're just skipping it. We're going to loop and go to the next doctor and check their record. Does that make sense? You guys following? Okay. I know this is long, but this is a really great example of how you can chain methods together and do everything in one line, right? We have an array, we looked at index I, and then inside that array, we looked at index 0, we changed it to lowercase, and now we're checking inside that result to see if that string includes our search term. Okay. So, and then we return the results. So let's go see what happens. And we're just gonna, how do I want to do this? We're just gonna pretend we only have one for now. Okay. So this is gonna actually get changed. But for now, let's say, let's just console log get, what did I call this? Did I call it search by name? Okay. All right. Search by name. And we said we have to pass in that new array, right? So we called that doctor data up there. And keep in mind, anytime you go to test something, and this is one of the reasons you need to do this in order, you can't even run this until this exists, right? So that's why we did it up front. Okay. So all I'm doing
That's going
here,
to work. I think that your function name is different. Is get search by name.
you're right. You're right. I wasn't I looked at it and then I completely, oh yeah, search by name. Thank you. So in another life, I might have named it search by name. Get and search kind of mean the same thing, don't they? Okay, search by name. So all we're going to do is just test to make sure that this one function we've written has worked. But ultimately, we're not going to go get it this way because we're going to have, two other functions we're going to concern ourselves with. But let's just test this out and see how it goes. Okay, what kind would you like? We'll get that information. And pretending that we had it set up that way, 0 would lead us to this one. So please enter all or part of a first name. Let's try to break it first, right? Let me put in a 3. No numbers or spaces. Please enter all or part of a first name. Then what if I were to try to do, John Smith? It's got a space. It's going to catch it, right? So we know that our while loop is working. So now let's put in just John and see what comes back. And it's bringing back this results array. This is the results that we returned, and it has 2 records in it. It's got John Watson and John Carter, right? Is everybody tracking with that? Okay, because in our function, it's important to pay attention to what's being returned. In our function, we declared this results array so that we could put as many records that matched as we find in it. And then down here, we return it. So when we call that down here in our run program, that's what's coming back is an array. And right now we just said, let's just print that so we can take a look at it. And that's how it came back. Okay. So let's go do this for the other 2. And again, I'm just going to copy them so that we can save a little bit of time. And then we'll talk through them. That will definitely be faster than coding them from scratch. All right, so I'm replacing these 2. Okay. So now we've got search by letter. Same thing, we pass in that new data structure that we created. Same thing, we have to start with an empty array so we can push things into it when it matches. And this time, instead of asking them for a name, we ask them for a single letter. Which letter of the alphabet would you like to search the last names by? And then we validate it. We make sure that it is in fact a letter and not a number. And then we also make sure that it's not more than 1 letter. We check letter.length and make sure that it's only equal to 1. If it's greater than 1, it's going to catch it and it's going to ask them again. And in this case, I just simplified my statement. Please enter a letter of the alphabet. That's about as simple as you can get, right? And then once you have a valid input, a single letter, you can build your results. So this is very similar to what we did before. We go and we loop through doctor arrays. This is the same thing that was passed in up here. So we use that variable. And first we check the doctor. And then we check index 0 because that's where the last names are, right? We see that over here in this output.
Excuse me, does that check for special characters as well?
Say that again?
Does the test for, what is it? Not a number and length
No.
less, or
Yes.
yeah, no.
I know what
Okay,
you're saying. Like
sorry.
if I had a comma or a quote or something, or yeah.
Or space or some weird
It
keyboard
does. Yeah, it does not. And you're
or
right.
emoji.
It would be a lot, an emoji, yeah. It would be a lot better if we did. I did not go to that trouble for this, but you're right. That would actually be even better, is to check
Okay.
things. So
Sorry, just asking.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. You could build that in. We could have some more ors here, and check that. But for now, I decided to err on the side of they accidentally put 2 letters, or 3 letters, or or a whole name, or they, accidentally put in a number. Okay, so we're over here and we're looking at our doctor arrays, the entire structure. We find the specific doctor at index I. So here's an example of that. Then we look at index 0 to look at the last name. And then that string, we also can use bracket notation for to look at the individual characters. So we're looking for character 0. And that's exactly how we know that we are arriving at the first letter of the last name is to look at the doctor, look at the last name, look at the first letter of the last name. Everybody follow that? Okay. And then we're checking that. And in this case, I decided not to go with to lowercase because it's already uppercase. I know it's going to be uppercase. So all I did was decide to compare it against the letter they gave us and actually convert that to uppercase. So I'm comparing an uppercase against uppercase, and I know that won't be a problem. So if it matches, it pushes it into our results array. And it pushes the whole doctor, all 3 pieces of information. So same thing, we're going to end up with some results for that. Our search by area code, very similar. The difference is we are giving them 3 specific choices and we're expecting them to put in exactly one of those choices. So we can say, if it's not equal to one of these things, so all 3 of these conditions have to be true, right? It can't be anything other than these 3. Otherwise, it's going to trigger this, and then we're going to, have to ask them again, please enter a valid area code. So then we build the results, same thing this time. We are going, we have to look at this information a little bit differently, but we go when we find the specific doctor, we go to index 2 of this array because the phone numbers are here, right? 0, 1, 2. And then we're going to take a slice because we are only interested in those first 3 characters right there, 3, 1, and 4. And by the way, you'll notice I just said characters, right? So when we did this up here, we didn't check to see if it was equal to
Thank
314.
you.
We checked to make sure that it was actually 314 as a string, because that's how it was reading it coming in. So sometimes when you have things like this, it's actually important not to treat them as a number. You want to make sure to treat it as a string. So we're taking that slice, starting with index 0 and going up to, but not including 3. So that way we get 0, 1, and 2. And it's only going to check these characters right here against the area code. That was what we asked them to give us. That was our variable for accepting their input. So we check those against each other. If it matches, we push them into the array, and then we return the results. So now we have 3 distinct functions that check, they perform different things depending on which search that they chose. So we can go ahead and we can create that array now, and I'm pausing because I'm going to copy and paste it for you. All right. So now we've got our 3 functions: search by name, search by letter, and search by area code. Notice that these function names do not include the parentheses because you're not calling the function here. All you're doing is referencing it. Does that make sense? So you want to use the name of the function, everything that's right here. Sorry, right there. But you don't want to include the parentheses or any parameters it might take. You just want the name. You're just referencing it. You're storing these 3 functions inside this array search functions. And this is the one that we're going to use their choices to refer to, right? Because we told them, if you want to search by name, give us 0. If you want to search by letter, give us 2. I'm sorry, 1. If you want to search by area code, give us 2. And so these are the 3. And down here, we can actually ask for that now, because and we can do it the way that we planned to do it. Go get the results using the correct search function. So let me make sure I am going to do this properly, because yeah, okay. I wanted to plan ahead because we also have that choice 3 to return all results, right? Let's deal with that in just a second. Right now, let's just say we're going to create a variable called let results. So we can store whatever comes back from one of these functions. And then we're going to go get it from search functions. And we're going to take in the search type index, right? We want them to choose, we want to go get the function that corresponds to the index they gave us. Now, here's where it gets tricky. At this point, you're calling the function, so you do have to use the parentheses and the parameters. So we're going to put that after the bracket because this entire thing represents a function now, right? We went to the array and we referenced it. So because remember, search type index is a number. So this whole thing represents one of those three functions. So now we can call it, and we're going to pass in doctor data because that's what those functions are expecting. All three of them are, expecting this so that it's consistent. All right. So let's just console log the results so that we can see what's happening without actually having our print function yet, because we don't. Okay, let's run this. And we'll just choose 0, 1, or 2 for now, since we don't have 3 worked out. Let's do 2, search by area code. Which area code would you like to search? Let's go with 618. And it brings back all of the doctors that have numbers that are in the 618 area code. Okay, let's run it again. We don't have a loop yet, right? So we have to keep stopping it and starting it. But we're just testing, so that's okay. Let's choose 1 this time. First letter of a last name. Let's go with C. We've got all of the doctors whose names end in C. I'm sorry, last names begin with C. And so that's working. It's great. Now let's run it again. And this time I'll choose 0. So we can search by name. Let's see, we did John before. Oh, I know, I've got 2 doctors whose names are Shepherd, but they're spelled differently. So I'm just gonna, and I can't remember which one's which. So we're just gonna go look for Shep. There we go. We've got Jack Shepherd and Derek Shepherd. And they both come back because it has that little string in it. Okay. All right, everybody good so far? We've got our 3 different functions. We've got them referenced in an array. We're using our index to go get them from that array. And then we are bringing back those results.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the line number 181 here, have we ever used result somewhere? Because I think did we use the result somewhere, that variable?
In here, no.
No. Okay.
So yeah. Okay, I know what you're getting at. So this again is one of those things that's about scope, right?
Okay.
Each of these functions can use results over and over because it's inside those functions. If it existed anywhere outside the functions, things would get horribly, horribly confused because now we've got a results variable that's global. It can be accessed from anywhere in the program, but it's not. And sometimes it's actually useful for you to use the same one as long as they're independent of one another, just because you always know what you're going for, right?
Okay.
I did the same thing here with search type index in the get search type function. I actually used that same name up here and returned it that way, just so that it's helpful for me to remember that they correspond to one another.
Okay, I have one more. I'm a little confused on line number 181. So here you are calling the search function of search type index. Actually, what this actually does?
Okay. Yeah. So search functions is an array.
Yeah.
It's the one that we just created right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
That holds all 3 of them. So, we're using bracket notation to go get one of them, and depending on what the user has chosen, 0, 1, or 2, it goes up here and it chooses one of those functions. So if they said, I want to search by name, and they choose index 0, now we know which one to get from the array.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is not beginner stuff. This is where things start to get a little bit complex. And so it's, I'm covering these kinds of things because it will be very useful for you when you go to do things that are not exactly the same, but a little bit the same concept in graded assignment 2. Okay, now I'm going to take out let's see, how do I, no, I'm going to keep the console log in there yet, because the other thing we haven't handled here is one of the options is to display all doctors, right? And we don't really need a function for that, because all we have to do is just display doctor data. We've already got all of the doctors together, right? And later, when we have a function for printing it, we'll make it look nice. But for now, let's put a little bit of logic in here that will actually return something. Okay. Yeah, here we go. That actually matches. So this time we're going to actually declare, actually I should do it here. Let results, and I'm just going to declare it. I'm not going to give it anything because it might have different values depending on which of these is true. So if search type index, and oh boy, we're getting into trouble here because I have changed my my variable name from what it was in my other one. So give me just a second to make sure it's consistent for you. All right. Yeah, so if our search type index, if they actually chose 3 here to display all doctors, all we want to do is make a copy of the original array. And I called it something different there again. Sorry, guys. All right, here's a little trick for you. See how I've got it in 2 different places? If you highlight it once and you right click, you can say change all occurrences. And now I can do doctor data. Notice it's putting it in both places, right? It saved me some work. I didn't have to go find them all. Okay, so now we're going and we're looking at the doctor data we created up here, and we're taking a slice, and there's no parameters, and that's because we're basically just saying take the whole thing. It would be the same thing as saying slice 0, just take from index 0 all the way to the end. And so now we have a copy that we can work with. This is important because you're going to need it to be stored in the variable results, but you don't necessarily. Sometimes you don't want it to actually refer back to the original array, because the way that it stores the information, it's just going to, without this slice, it would point back to this structure. And if for some reason later you were to change that, that would be problematic, because you really only intended for it to be a copy. So then we have our other condition. If they did not search, choose 3, then you know, because you validated, it's going to come back as 0 to 2. So now you can do what we did before and say, you know, my search functions, I'm going to go get the one that corresponds to the index they gave us, 0, 1, or 2. And I'm going to feed in that doctor data, and then you'll get back the results. So now when we console log results, we should get, you know, one of these 4 things, right? So let's go run it again. And this time I can do 1, and I can do, you know, S, and we got all of the S's back. So we know that's part still working. And then we can check, sorry, there we go. We can check by 3, and it does not give us what we're expecting. So let's see what's going on. Results equals doctor data dot slice. Interesting. Okay, so it's not coming back as I expected.
Should the results be an array when we declare? Line number 1.
They don't have to be. It doesn't have to be, because you're basically only assigning the value when you get here. You could do this and it would overwrite it, but it's not necessary. The only time you really have to do this is if you're going to push things into it.
Okay.
Yeah, because you have to have somewhere to push it. So yeah, this is not working, and I am not sure why immediately, but let's go see. What if, let's just try it with the index. It shouldn't matter, but we'll do it anyway. Oh, come on. Yeah. Doctor slice 0.
Is results holding an array, or is it holding a string?
It's holding the array, because This array holds arrays. So all we're doing is taking all of the elements from the entire array and copying it. I mean, it literally should be a copy of doctor data. So
Did you try, I apologize. I just cut you off. Did we try putting a 0 in? Just seeing if it goes with 0 inside of the slice?
yeah, I just did, and it was the same. Yeah, and then I took it back out. Yeah, this is the way I have it in my other copy of this, my completed solution. So I know that it works there. So I'm not sure why it's not working here. Let's see. What's the search type index? Did I put something in wrong here? No. I mean, I literally copied and pasted this over, so it should have been fine. Search type index. Just making sure I don't have any typos.
Could we not make it just results equals doctor data?
You could, and it would point back to this, and that would be fine. But if you want to make a copy, this is how you do it. So we can try it. I mean, it'll. Yeah, there it goes. I wonder why the slice isn't working. That's really strange. It should. It works in my other program. Okay, so we'll leave it here for now, just so it works going forward. But yeah, it should have worked with the slice. I'm not sure why it didn't, because making a copy is a much better practice than referring back to the original array, even if it doesn't matter. I just wanted to show you that was a good practice. But yeah, so I don't know what's going on there. Something weird's happening. Let's move on.
Where
So
was
now-
doctor data first instantiated? Oh, okay. And that's like in the main part.
Yeah, this is in our run program.
Okay.
That's why we had to do it first, is because we were going
Okay.
to use it here.
Huh, that is weird.
Yeah, it should have worked. Okay, so we've got our results declared. We go and we figure out which type of results they need. Is it the whole array, or is it filtered through one of our 3 search functions? And then we have that. So instead of console log results, now we're actually going to create a function to allow us to print everything in a really pretty way. And so let's get rid of that. And now let's go to the print results for user. So this is our next part. I really should have put to-dos on those. It would be easier to read. That's okay. And again, I'm going to grab this to save us a little bit of time. We want it to be here. That's why. Okay, there we go. Nice and pretty. Now, we want our function to be up here, and then we're going to call it from the run program function. So we've got cases where the results array might have no records. We want to have a nice way of saying that, right? So let's just, handle that little edge case first. If results.length equals 0, then let's just say, sorry, no results found. But if it does have it, then we can say, results. And I've got this as kind of a little header just to make it, in the little footer down here to set it apart from everything. But the real meat of this is this loop right here. We go through each of the results. And this is where, remember from our instructions, it said it wanted it formatted like this, right? So that's what we're going to take care of now. We're going to make sure that we console log. We're going to put that doctor in front. I'm using a template literal to make it easy to format this. We go to results for the particular doctor in question. We go to get their first name at index 1. And then we go over here and get index 0 for the last name. And then on the next line, we're going to console log the phone number. So we go to that doctor, which is at index I, and we get the string that is at index 2. This is this one over here. Okay. So now that should repeat, and I have the space that's supposed to be in between each doctor record right there. That \n will handle it for those two console logs together. And then everything should just print, because this function happens to be all about just console logging things. It has nothing to do with returning any sort of value. So there's no return statement. So let's go call this. We want to just print the results, and we want to feed in our results, whatever they are that came back from up here. And let's see what happens. All right, let's search by name, and we'll do John again. I know that one's in there. 2 results found: Dr. John Watson, phone number; Dr. John Carter, phone number, and a nice, it's kind of set apart with those little headers. I just put that in just to make it a little fancier. Okay, and then if we were to run it again, and let's do something that'll produce more results. How about running it with the search by first letter of last name? And this time I'll choose T. Oh, I think I accidentally, I'm sorry. Something weird just happened. All right, let's try that again. Search by first letter of last name, T. There we go. Okay. Now let's do it by area code. We'll just check it out. Oh, okay, there we go. And let's do 314 this time. Wow, that's a lot of results, which makes sense, right? It's the heart of St. Louis. So it tells us here we've got 28 results, and it lists them all out nice and clean. And then we have our end. Okay, so we know that's working just the way we want. And then we ask if the user wants to search again. So this is our,
We're not sorting them.
you know what? I'm glad you brought that up.
Sorry, go ahead.
You're absolutely right. I intended to, I kind of left it out on purpose, and I was going to go back and add it later. We can do that right now. That's fine. So what do you think is the best point to, when we were working with all this doctor data, to sort it?
Last name.
Sure. But once it's an array of arrays, that gets really complicated, right?
Mm,
So what if we were to actually do it
in the
right
transform.
here before we transform it? Because that way we know that doctors is already sorted, because it's, they're strings, right? So all you have to do is go check that, right there. And it's going to sort everything automatically because it's just one string. And then it'll already be sorted before it creates the new array with the doctors and arrays. Yeah, so let's run this again, and we'll do the same thing. 2, 3, 1, 4. There you go. So we've got everything from B down to W, and they're all in order. Yeah, I'm glad you caught that. See, you're thinking.
Thank you.
All these little things that are in the instructions. Yeah, and you definitely want to go back and like reread your instructions from time to time to make sure you're accounting for everything. So that's good. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is ask them if they want to search again. And this is the part where we're going to want to implement our loop, right? So that they can run this program, they can run a search as many times as they want while the program is still running, I should say. Okay, let's actually do this part first. Let's go ahead and put the loop in place, because it's easier to write this once we have that done. And you'll see why in a second. Okay. We've got this. Now we have the loop. So this is the part where we want the while loop. So we're going to say while, and we're going to put some sort of Boolean expression in here, right? Or Boolean variable. And then we're going to have this, and I'm going to move that down here below the part where we're going to ask the user if they want to search again. And now we have everything inside this while loop. Is that clear? Because these are all the things that we want to be able to do over and over again. So we need something here to evaluate. And I think, most of the time it's easy to, you either make a comparison of some kind, or you could just have a Boolean to begin with. Why don't we create a Boolean that's called, I need to actually declare it, keep searching. And we're going to make it true to begin with, because we're going to assume that they want to keep going until they say they don't, right? So then when we have our while loop, we'll say while keep searching. And all we have to do is put keep searching. Could you put, equals true? Sure, but you don't have to, because this is already something that evaluates to true. It's a Boolean. So while keep searching, then it'll keep going. So this is the part where we want to find out whether they want to keep searching or not. And I think, let's see, let's just make an if statement, and because all we need to really find out is if they're changing it. And this way this is going to be one of these instances where you don't store the result of input.question in a variable, because you only need to use it once. And that's why I wanted to do this way, is to show you an example of that. So we can just say, would you like to search again? And then, yes or no. And I'm going to put some little formatting stuff in here, and then give them a chance to respond to that. And then we're saying if that comes back as yes. No, we said we wanted to do something if it wasn't true, right? So let's say if they do anything other than, and let's make this to uppercase so that it evaluates it no matter what they put in, lowercase or uppercase. If it's not equal to y, then we're going to break that loop, right? So this is where keep searching now becomes false. Okay. So only if they say something other than y, and actually, this is a sneaky way to handle it, because they literally, the only thing that they can put to keep searching is y. If they put anything other than y, not just n, but anything other than y, it's going to stop. So, I kind of sneakily took care of some validation there. But you could actually put in proper validation if you wanted to make sure they said y or n. But in any case, this is going to make it false, which means when it gets down to here at the end of the while loop, it comes back and says, should I keep searching? And this is no longer true. So it's going to end the while loop. So then the last thing we do is have a little, outro message. And we'll just say, thank you for using our directory, because we're nice and polite, right? And there again, the last thing to do is just to run this program. So let's give this a try and make sure our loop is working as we expect it to. Okay, let's search by first letter of last name. Oh, I'm sorry, by area code 2. I pushed the wrong one. And this is why we have validation, folks. I could have pushed 4 and it would have screwed everything up. All right, so we got back 14 results. They're sorted and formatted nicely. And now it's asking me, would you like to search again? I'm going to say yes in lowercase. Which type of search would you like to do? Well, this time, let's do first letter of last name 1. We'll search by G. And we have 3 results, 3 different doctors that come back. Would I like to search again? Yes. And this time I'd like to search. No, I just want to see them all. Just display all. And I get them all. And then I hit no, and it gives me a little message and it stops the program. So that's the whole thing, guys, right there. We just did it all in one sitting, which is not how it's going to go when you go to do graded assignment 2. It's going to take you a lot longer than that, so plan ahead. But this is the process that you kind of go through. You take stock of what you've got, think about where you need to go, decide how you're going to structure all of your data, think about what each of your little functions needs, and then how you're going to bring that all together in one big function at the end that just runs the program. That's all it does. And then you just call the one function. That's the only thing you call out here, and the whole thing runs. Okay, anybody got any questions?
Very cool.
It is cool. This is fun stuff, guys, because you're getting to put together all these things that you've learned, and you're arriving at a point where you can create some cool little programs by putting it all together. The last thing I've got in this document, by the way, and we could take more questions in a second if you have them, is I've talked about coding and testing one thing at a time, and we just demonstrated that, right? And I talk about adding that while loop as the last thing, make sure that the program is actually running one time before you repeat it. Okay, so strategies for creating a great program. Consider the user experience. You want to humanize your interface and use, kind of a friendly voice when you're speaking to the user. Think through all the possible ways and validate, right? And then implement validation. And if you have to do that, make sure you make it clear to them. And we talked about that before. And we also talked about using escape characters like \n and \t to control how things are formatted. Make it easy to read. You want to make it a good experience. Okay, consider the developer's view. That's for you. And it's also for anyone else who might try to look at and understand your code. In the professional setting, this is normal because you're going to come and work on some code that was written a few years ago, and you need to be able to understand it. So the person who wrote it needed to be able to do a pretty good job of explaining what it all was. So you can use comments and to-dos to kind of, lay things out, remind you of what you still need to code. You can, name your variables and functions well. Think about what they truly represent. If you have an array of several things, you're probably going to give that array like we had doctors in the beginning, right? I didn't call it doctor, I called it doctors, plural, because it was a list of doctors. So, think about those types of things, and options. In this case, it's just a string. When I chose, because it was representing a number, when I actually went to get the option they selected, I called it, see here again, I'm running into screenshots from a different program, but I called it, search type index, right? That's actually a better name than this because it represents a number. Indent properly, and I can show you this little hint. You can do this in just about any IDE like Visual Studio Code, IntelliJ, also here in Replit. You can change this to tabs instead of spaces, makes it real easy to indent. And you can change the indent size. You'll notice my stuff is very indented. And that's because I keep it at 4 instead of 2. I prefer that. It keeps things a lot cleaner. You can see very clearly how things are nested inside one another. I've got, a conditional here with its contents nested inside this while loop, which is nested inside the function. You want to keep it nice and clean. And then clarifying comments. So you can kind of see I've got, a few comments here to kind of say, okay, this is what the next code is about. This is what the next code is about. Yeah. And then of course, I reference back to this document that we talked about at the beginning that has all the practice stuff, and we'll have this file in just a second. I'm going to have it in here. And I also am putting in this, how to create a program with multiple functions. This file is actually going to be right here at the beginning in this first section. I'm going to add it right there. So you can always get to that quickly too if you want. Okay, are there any other questions?
At the start, as you were thinking through what needed to be done,
Mhm.
would you leave those in even like once your code is created, or would you go through and like take all that stuff out?
Definitely clean your code up. Like right now, I probably would go back to all of those temporary little console logs I did because I know the code works now. I don't need them. Those were just when I was having to test things because other parts didn't exist yet, So yeah, you can clean things up like that. I could take the to-dos out. If you want to do that for your whole program, here again, change all occurrences and then just boop, and it's done. So, and then, if you want to take some of these comments out, you can. Because I, write these with students in mind, I have a lot more comments than you might actually write if you were doing this in a professional setting. But yeah, so it's really up to, it's your discretion. You can leave some things, you can take them out. Yeah, it's whatever you think is going to be the easiest long term, because you want your code to be clean. You don't like, I definitely would not have all of these comments if this was like a professional setting. But there again, like I said, with students, looking at it, I want to make sure that everything's very clear.
And you said that we're talking about objects in next Saturday session.
Yes. Next Saturday session will definitely include objects. We'll work with them quite a bit because you will definitely need to do that for graded assignment number 2. It will be heavily based around the use of objects.